Hello, my name is Gerald Perryman. Today I will be speaking with you about the digital divide in ethnic and lower income communities using the public library. I am a student in the Master of Library and Information Science program at Valdosta State. The digital divide in lower income and minority communities is a major issue negatively affecting minority communities, but the gap could be closed with technology, innovation, and public support. But before we get too far on discussing how and who the digital divide is affecting, we should talk about what exactly is the digital divide. The digital divide is essentially unequal access to and the use of internet by all. Digital divide is usually measured via access to the internet versus non-access. The number of sites at which the internet is accessed, the user's ability using the internet, the amount of time spent online, the lack of access to information digitally, and the diversity of happenings carried out digitally. The intended audience for this webinar is the general public, library professionals, political figures, state and federal government leaders, and social media platforms. This webinar could impact decision makers and give them a basic understanding of why this issue is so important for their constituents. Who could benefit from the information in this webinar? The people that will benefit from this webinar will hopefully be library professionals, educators, and political leaders, but mainly the individuals affected by the digital divide. Patrons of color are affected at a more disproportional rate when compared to white people. In research studies by the Pew Research Institute, Free Press, and Institute for Local Self-Reliance, racial disparities in digital access has been deemed critical. What are the barriers facing patrons of color? Also, what are their perspectives, purposes, and beliefs in using technologies at the public library? And how has COVID-19 exacerbated this issue? Until recently, many libraries were virtual, causing a major disconnect from the patrons who needed them the most. People without digital access struggle to complete their schoolwork. They may not have access to apply for housing or for jobs. Trapped between a pandemic and the digital divide, these patrons may find their lives to be in upheaval. How has COVID-19 exacerbated this issue? Internet inequality existed before the pandemic, and now the situation has been exacerbated for many people without internet or public library access. Frequently, they are faced with financial challenges that are exacerbated during this pandemic. They are also more likely to fall victim to the virus itself, since the groups that are presented with higher rates of COVID-19 infections are more likely to live in precarious housing, fall within the lower income status, and be identified as immigrants and visible minorities. In two research studies in California centered on lived experiences of people of color as public library patrons, provided chances for public libraries to adjust their services for ethnic patrons in the communities they serve and how to improve their services to these underserved communities. Participants shared that they would feel more comfortable speaking with someone with a similar background when seeking help in a library. Not having a diverse staff is a barrier for patrons as well. This problem is not a United States problem, but an international issue. In South Africa, they have a National Development Plan, a policy that charts the country's development up until 2030 to ensure that high-speed broadband internet is universally available at competitive prices. This type of plan could be implemented in each community to help close the digital divide in a local area. Let me start by introducing you to a great organization that has many great examples and advice on how to mend and close the gap of the digital divide. The National Digital Inclusion Alliance is a unified voice for home broadband access, public broadband access, personal devices, and local technology training and support programs. They work collaboratively to craft, identify, and disseminate financial and operational resources for digital inclusion programs while serving as a bridge to policymakers and the general public. NDIA has 310 affiliated organizations in 38 states, the District of Columbia, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. One potential solution to the digital divide would be the most obvious: financial support. Financial means and funding could be used to expand service hours, improve computer access time by getting more computers, hire staff with language skills that can reflect the community's demographic. The staff could also offer technology training for underserved patrons. Without additional funding, communities experiencing digital exclusion will continue to be impacted by this issue. If finding additional funding is an issue or is a challenge to your current library, think about creating a digital inclusion coalition and seek state and federal funding to help end the digital divide in your local community. Now, you might ask, what's a digital inclusion coalition? It is a group of community members working for digital inclusion and equity in their communities. They address digital inequities through their own programs, through partnerships within the community, and by acting as one unified entity, setting goals, educating, and advocating. The coalitions exist to enable its members working together to accomplish goals they can't accomplish separately. A great free resource is the Digital Inclusion Coalition Guidebook, which was developed by the National Digital Inclusion Alliance with support from Media Democracy Fund and the Cleveland Foundation. The benefits of a digital inclusion coalition go even further when you think of how, as a group, you will be able to advocate and persuade community leaders and the public to take the need for digital inclusion more seriously. You'll be able to increase the community influence of your member organizations, make a case for more support, including funding for your member programs, create legitimacy and support for other public or community initiatives, for example, affordable broadband options for low-income neighborhoods. These are some additional resources that I picked up from the NDIA, which lists some digital inclusion coalitions in cities across America in case you want to check them out to see how they operate and how they work, to maybe use them as some inspiration for your own. And also on the right, the U.S. data sources on digital divides gives you some more data and information on how the digital divide is affecting everyone across the country, and as we discussed in this webinar, is affecting some more than others. I would like to thank you for listening to my webinar, and have a nice day. The references you see here are some of the scholarly articles that I use for the data and information in this webinar.